One slap against a royal guard's face set off a chain reaction like a match to dry tinder, shattering his privileged world in seconds. The illusion of protection from his father's position disintegrated instantly. What happens when the son of power collides with an institution built on centuries of discipline and respect? The security cameras caught everything: the smirk, the slap, and the swift response that changed his life forever. Those silent digital witnesses would soon become central to the unfolding drama, revealing truths that neither his family connections nor wealth could hide. His momentary arrogance had sparked consequences nobody could have anticipated. If you want more stories like this, hit the like button and subscribe for more royal guard moments where tradition meets real-world justice. The morning sun glinted off his cufflinks as he stepped from the black sedan. Alexander Crane, heir to a political dynasty that spanned 3 generations, had mastered the art of making an entrance. Born into the upper echelons of society, Alexander had never known a world where doors remained closed or requests went unfulfilled. His father, Foreign Minister Victor Crane, had cultivated a sphere of influence that functioned as a protective bubble around his only son, insulating him from the natural consequences that shaped ordinary lives. Alexander's childhood had unfolded in mansions and private academies, where his tantrums were met with acquiescence rather than discipline. His father's team quietly handled his indiscretions, settling with property owners when he damaged their possessions, ensuring academic records remained unblemished despite complaints about his behavior. The young Crane learned early that rules bent in his presence. This education in exceptionalism taught him more than any classroom ever could. It taught him that he was different, special, immune to the constraints that governed lesser men. Each intervention reinforced the lesson: consequences were for other people. As he approached the palace grounds that day, Alexander carried himself with casual arrogance. His expensive shoes clicked against the marble, echoing through the vaulted entrance hall. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. His confidence radiated alongside his fake smile and oversized ego. The murmur of diplomatic conversations faltered as he passed. Eyes followed him, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. The air smelled of polish and perfume, the atmosphere charged with political electricity. Alexander inhaled it all as if it were his birthright. Security checkpoints were merely inconveniences in Alexander's mind, tedious rituals to be endured. When he reached the first perimeter, he barely acknowledged the personnel requesting his identification. His eyes skimmed over them as if they were furniture rather than people performing their duties. The absence of boundaries had corroded his perception of reality like acid-dissolving metal, slowly but completely. Normal social cues that signal stop or reconsider had faded from his recognition. The empathy that allows most people to respect others' authority had diminished through years of never having to depend on others' goodwill. Alexander moved through the venue surveying it like his kingdom. While others waited patiently for clearance, he pushed forward with entitled determination. His dismissive glances toward staff weren't calculated. They were instinctive expressions of a worldview where some people matter and others simply don't. When he approached the cordoned area where diplomats gathered, Alexander's stride didn't falter. The restriction wasn't meant for men like him. That's what a lifetime of exception had taught him. The red velvet rope might as well have been invisible. The royal guard stationed at the entrance, merely decorative. Then reality intruded. The guard shifted slightly, blocking Alexander's path with disciplined precision. The two worlds collided. Privilege met protocol. Entitlement faced duty. Alexander's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. "Do you know who I am?" The question escaped his lips with practiced indignation, but the guard's eyes remained fixed ahead, his posture unchanged. Alexander's irritation bloomed into anger. People nearby began to notice the confrontation. The one-sided demand for recognition meeting a wall of disciplined silence. Color rose in Alexander's cheeks as his composure cracked. In that moment of frustrated entitlement, Alexander Crane, son of Foreign Minister Victor Crane, third in line to chair the International Security Council, beneficiary of diplomatic immunity in 14 countries, made a decision that would shatter the carefully constructed reality his father had built around him. The tension in the air crystallized as Alexander stood before the royal guard, whose stoic presence formed an immovable barrier between him and the VIP section he demanded to enter. It was precisely 3:42 p.m., just as the afternoon reception was reaching its peak in the Grand Hall's East Wing. The guard stood perfectly positioned, shoulders squared, chin level, eyes focused straight ahead, a living embodiment of centuries of tradition blocking the path of momentary entitlement. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Alexander's voice carried across the marble flooring, causing nearby conversations to falter. The guard remained motionless, his red uniform immaculate, his posture unflinching. The only acknowledgement of Alexander's question was a slight, almost imperceptible tightening around the guard's eyes. "Sir, this area is restricted to official delegates only," came the measured response, delivered without emotion or inflection. The guard's gaze never wavered, fixed on a point somewhere beyond Alexander, as though the son of one of the world's most influential diplomats was merely air to be looked through. Alexander's complexion began to change, a flush of crimson starting at his collar and working its way up his neck. His jaw clenched visibly, a muscle twitching along his temple. His manicured fingers curled into fists at his sides, knuckles whitening. Privilege confronting its first genuine obstacle. "My father chairs the committee that funds your entire operation," Alexander hissed, leaning closer, close enough that anyone watching could see spittle form at the corners of his mouth. "You will step aside. Now." The guard stood unmoving. "I'm afraid I cannot do that, sir. Protocol requires—" The room crystallized. Nearby attendees turned, sensing the confrontation's escalation. A diplomat's wife froze mid-sip of champagne. An attaché lowered his phone, finger hovering over the camera button. Even the ambient noise receded, as if the room itself held its breath. Alexander's body language shifted abruptly. His weight transferred to his back foot, his right hand rising. The guard saw it coming but remained at attention, training overriding instinct. What followed was a dismissive scoff, followed by a light slap to the guard's cheek. The sound was sharp but not loud, like a book closing firmly. The guard's head moved slightly, more from surprise than force. His discipline held even as his cheek reddened, eyes still fixed ahead. This steadfast composure appeared to infuriate Alexander more than any resistance would have. A heartbeat of silence hung in the air, a momentary calm before the inevitable storm. Would this single act of entitlement become tomorrow's diplomatic crisis? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phone cameras rose in unison like a field of electronic flowers suddenly blooming. A woman whispered, "Oh my God," in at least 3 different languages. Alexander stood there, triumph etched across his features, unaware that security cameras had captured the moment from 3 different angles, unaware that signals were already pulsing through hidden earpieces, unaware that his moment of dominance was collapsing around him. 2 men in charcoal suits materialized seemingly from nowhere, moving with quiet efficiency. A woman in a dark blue dress approached from the left, her smile diplomatic but her eyes cold as winter. "Mr. Crane," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to come with us immediately." Her tone made it clear this was not a request. Alexander's smirk faltered. Confusion replaced confidence in his eyes. "Do you know who—" "Yes, sir, we know exactly who you are," she interrupted, placing a firm hand on his elbow while the men blocked any potential escape. "That's precisely why we need to handle this situation with the utmost discretion." The guard hadn't moved. His stillness now seemed like power, the patient, immovable force of an institution that had weathered far worse storms than an entitled diplomat's son. As security extracted Alexander, guests parted like water around a stone. Phones disappeared, their owners suddenly aware they had witnessed something with international repercussions. The guard remained at his post, the slight redness on his cheek the only evidence that anything had occurred at all. Behind closed doors, Alexander's smirk dissolved into disbelief as the machinery of diplomatic consequence began its relentless work. Have you ever wondered what happens in the immediate aftermath when someone believes they've successfully challenged an ancient institution only to discover they've merely triggered a system designed to withstand far greater threats than a diplomat's son? The security team moved with Alexander through the corridors of power like water flowing around stone, smoothly, inevitably, without resistance. No rough handling, no raised voices, no dramatic scene for onlookers. This wasn't an arrest, it was an extraction, performed with professional precision. Alexander felt a hand placed firmly on his elbow, bodies positioned to block escape routes without appearing threatening, voices kept deliberately low. Alexander found himself guided into a small, tastefully appointed room that belied its true purpose as a security holding area. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than a slam. His heart rate quickened as 3 security personnel took positions around him, not hovering, but unmistakably present. The weight of reality pressed upon him like a physical force, his certainty evaporating with each passing second. "What is the meaning of this?" Alexander demanded, his voice hollow compared to its previous authority. The lead security officer, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had witnessed decades of similar entitlement, simply nodded. "We know exactly who you are, Mr. Crane. That's precisely why we're here." For the first time in his adult life, Alexander faced people showing no deference, no hesitation. These weren't the apologetic expressions of service workers he'd intimidated before. These were the resolute faces of people who served something larger than any individual's connections. Outside that room, an invisible ballet of diplomatic damage control had already begun. What had started as a personal outburst was transforming into an international incident with every passing minute. In embassies across the city, secure phones rang with urgent priority. Diplomatic attachés drafted preliminary statements, while government officials who attended the event were pulled into hasty consultations. Meanwhile, the royal guard remained at his post, a living statue. The slight redness on his cheek had begun to fade, but the wound to centuries of tradition would require substantial healing. The event continued in hushed tones, attendees giving him a wider berth, their eyes occasionally darting to him with newfound respect. In the security control center, technicians isolated footage showing 3 separate camera angles of the incident, each capturing with damning clarity the entitlement, the refusal, the slap. These videos were encrypted and transferred to secure servers for increasingly senior officials to review. Alexander surrendered his phone with visible reluctance. When finally permitted a call, it was on a monitored line with observers present. "Father, there's been a misunderstanding," he began, his voice unnaturally high. "They're treating me like some common criminal." The conversation that followed revealed everything through Alexander's expressions. Color drained from his cheeks. His confident shoulders slumped. He was hearing his father's voice without its usual shield of protection. By the call's end, Alexander understood no rescue was coming. As twilight descended, diplomatic channels between nations crackled with activity. Formal apologies were being demanded at the highest levels. Meetings scheduled between ambassadors. Press secretaries awakened with unwelcome news. In that small holding room, Alexander Crane, heir to political power, accustomed to frictionless movement through life's obstacles, sat alone with the dawning realization that he had finally found the immovable object to his unstoppable force. His name, which had opened so many doors, had finally closed one that mattered. As footage of the incident broke free from government channels, the video breathed a life of its own, multiplying across digital platforms with viral ferocity. What happened in that exclusive diplomatic space became public property in just hours. The security footage traveled from secure servers to millions of phones worldwide, unleashing a judgment no diplomatic immunity could deflect. Social media erupted, like a digital wildfire in drought conditions. Crane shame and entitled elite rocketed to top trending positions globally as notifications lit up phones from Tokyo to Toronto. Comment sections transformed into tribunals where public opinion delivered swift verdicts. "This is what happens when you never hear the word no," read one comment with over 50,000 likes. The reaction was overwhelming, a tidal wave washing away the carefully constructed image of the Crane dynasty. "I watched that video and immediately thought of every entitled rich kid who's gotten away with everything," posted Eliza Chen, a university student whose reaction video garnered millions of views. "This time, we all get to see the consequences play out." Outside the family's metropolitan penthouse, news vans formed a media encampment. Reporters stalked family members, doormen, even maintenance staff, anyone who might provide insight into the man behind the SLAP. Political cartoonists created devastating caricatures. Alexander as a spoiled child throwing tantrums in diplomatic settings, Victor desperately trying to sweep embarrassment under an increasingly tiny rug. The elder Crane's press conference, where he dismissed the incident as a minor misunderstanding between an overzealous security detail and my son, only intensified public outrage. Social media users juxtaposed his dismissive words with the footage itself, creating comparisons that made the denial appear absurdly out of touch. The public perceived not regret, but entitlement, a father shielding his son from accountability as always. Inside their penthouse, Alexander sat frozen before screens displaying his face. News anchors dissected his background, while investigative journalists unearthed previous incidents that had vanished thanks to his father's influence. A college bar fight quietly settled, a nightclub incident with waitstaff wiped clean, a driving incident where charges mysteriously disappeared, all resurrected in high-definition scrutiny. His phone fell eerily silent. Friends who had competed for his attention now claimed they barely knew him in hastily posted disclaimers. Invitations to exclusive events were rescinded with politely worded emails citing scheduling conflicts. Acquaintances set their social media accounts to private, digitally distancing themselves from the radioactive fallout of his actions. Behind the scenes, diplomatic machinery ground into overdrive. Draft statements moved between embassies, each word scrutinized for potential landmines. What might have been dismissed as a personal indiscretion in previous eras had transformed into an international incident requiring delicate navigation. In a conference room below Alexander's penthouse, crisis management specialists, PR experts, and legal advisors debated his statement. "Too stiff," argued PR. "Too apologetic," countered the lawyer. "Not apologetic enough," insisted the diplomatic advisor. Every word was dissected while Alexander's future hung in the balance, his trajectory altered by 5 seconds of unchecked arrogance. The punishment was comprehensive. Alexander received a lifetime ban from diplomatic functions in 14 countries, ironically the same 14 where he once enjoyed diplomatic immunity. His father was forced to recuse himself from key international negotiations. The family foundation lost major donors, and political allies suddenly found their schedules too full for meetings. Most painfully, Alexander delivered a public apology, scripted down to the last pause and contrite expression, broadcast live on international television. The silence of the royal guard spoke volumes that day. While never uttering a single word, he embodied a lesson that echoed through corridors of power. Respect transcends privilege. For Alexander, this represented a fundamental awakening to the world beyond his insulated existence. In the aftermath, he discovered the enduring strength found in accountability. The guard stood as a silent sentinel, tearing down towers of arrogance with unwavering dignity. His stance represented a living testament that institutions can stand beyond the reach of influence. As guardians of shared principles, they unite nations through their constancy. What towers of entitlement might we need dismantled in our own lives